I'm going to tell you what I saw. I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw, and I know how it sounds, and I know what the reports say, and I don't care. I was there. I was 6 feet from him when it started, and I've been awake for 39 hours since, and I still can't stop shaking. So you're going to let me tell it the way I need to tell it, or this interview is over. All right. His name was Marcus Dre. That's what I knew him as. Marcus Dre, human, 34 years old, licensed Class VII diplomatic transport operator. He'd been driving for the Kalthara consulate for about 8 months. I hired him myself. I remember the interview. I remember sitting across from him in that cramped little office we had on the lower ring of Velanthi Station. The kind of office that always smelled like recycled coolant and someone's old lunch. And I remember thinking he was the most boring person I'd ever met. Not in a bad way, in the best possible way. You want boring when you're running security logistics for a sitting senator. Boring means predictable. Boring means no surprises. He came in, he sat down, he answered every question in exactly the right amount of words, not too many, not too few, and he had this face. I don't know how else to describe it, just a face. Not handsome, not ugly, not memorable. Brown hair going a little gray at the temples. Jaw that hadn't been shaved quite close enough. Eyes that were the kind of gray blue you see in overcast sky, the kind that doesn't really commit to a color. He had a good record, clean. 6 years of diplomatic transport, 2 of those working the outer reach routes, which is rough country even for veteran drivers. No incidents, no complaints. 2 commendations from previous posting, 1 from the Drenathi ambassador's personal security team, which, look, the Drenathi do not give commendations. They barely give thank yous, so that meant something. I hired him. 8 months. That's how long I watched this man do his job. He showed up on time, every time. He knew the senator's schedule better than some of her own staff. He learned the routes, the alternate routes, the emergency protocols, the docking procedures. He learned which side of the ground vehicle the senator preferred to exit from, which she never told him. He just watched and adjusted. He kept the interior at the temperature she liked without being asked. He stocked the console with the specific tea blend she drank in the morning, which required a special import order from 3 stations away. He was quiet. Not unfriendly, just quiet. When the senator's staff chatted during transit, he'd sometimes offer a word or two, something dry, usually, something that made people smile without quite understanding why. He had a way of saying the exact right thing with the exact minimum of effort that I've never seen in anyone else. I liked him. I think most of the staff liked him. In that vague, peripheral way you like someone who is very good at their job and very unobtrusive about it. Senator Vihala Osmuren, his direct charge, the woman he drove every single day, barely looked at him. That's not a criticism of her. That's how these things work. She was a senator, he was a driver. The geometry of their relationship was set before they ever met. She acknowledged him. She thanked him in the quick, automatic way people thank machines that work correctly. She said good morning most days. She told him her destination. She sat in the back seat and reviewed her briefs and made calls, and occasionally stared out the window at the station's interior ring spinning slowly past. And she never once, in 8 months, asked him a personal question. She didn't know his name, I think. Not really. Not the way you know a person's name. She called him driver when she called him anything at all. I think about that a lot now. I think about the 8 months of that and what it must have been like for him, and whether it mattered to him, or whether he'd gotten so good at the stillness that it stopped mattering a long time ago. I don't know. I never got to ask him. Entry dated 14 weeks prior to the Velanthi incident. The senator has a tell. I noticed it about 3 weeks in, but I've been sitting with it, making sure I'm reading it right before I write it down. Habit, old habit. When she's genuinely relaxed, not performing relaxation, not the senatorette she does for cameras and junior staff, her outer ear membranes go flat. The Keltharin's secondary ear structure, the lateral ridge ones, they angle outward when the individual is in a state of social alertness. Kind of like human shoulder tension, except you can't hide it if you know what to look for. When she drops them, she's actually at rest. She drops them in the car. Only in the car. I've watched her in the transit corridors, in the assembly antechambers, in the dining rooms where the delegations do their informal networking. The lateral ridges are always up, always angled, always broadcasting attention and readiness. Even in supposedly private moments with her staff, there's a performance to her posture. In the car, after about 60 seconds, they go flat. I don't know if she knows she does it, probably not. I think the car is the only place in her schedule that functions like actual rest. Not sleep, not meditation, not leisure. Rest. The absence of the performance. 60 seconds after the door closes and we pull into the transport lane, something in her just settles. I've made sure the interior is exactly right for that. Temperature, lighting, the specific frequency of the engine hum. I ran diagnostics on 4 different power cycling modes before I found the one that seemed to contribute to the settling. The T is part of it too, but the T is secondary. The quiet matters most, I think. So I stay quiet. It's not hard. I've been quiet for a long time. Entry dated 11 weeks prior to the Valanthe incident. I ran into one of the consulate security officers in the service corridor today. Ren something, Veryl's team. Young guy, big shoulders, the kind of Keltharin who leads with physical presence because it's worked for him so far. He asked me how it was going. I said fine. He asked if I found it strange working for aliens and I said not particularly. He laughed like I'd made a joke. When I didn't laugh back, he got a little uncertain and said something about it being good that the humans were integrating, very progressive, and moved on. I wasn't joking. I spent 11 years working with people who were not human. Most of them were trying to kill me. This is better. Entry dated 9 weeks prior to the Valanthe incident. Today the senator was in the vehicle for 47 minutes while we waited for a schedule conflict to clear. Unusual. Normally she would have gotten out and found a conference room, worked from there, maintained the performance. Today she didn't. About 20 minutes in, she asked me if I thought the assembly was going to ratify the Yendri Compact. I said I didn't know much about the Yendri Compact. She said that was probably healthy. Then she was quiet for a while, and I watched the station rings through the front viewport, and she watched something out the side window, and it was comfortable in a way I didn't expect. Before we got moving again, she asked me where I was from. I told her. She nodded, processing the geography of a planet she'd studied but never visited, the way people do when a place becomes briefly real to them through the presence of someone from it. She said she'd read that humans had a province in the northern continent where the storms were very large. I said yes. She said they sounded frightening. I said they were if you hadn't grown up with them. She said she supposed that was true of most frightening things. Then the schedule cleared and we moved on, and she was the senator again, reviewing her briefs, and I was the driver again, watching the route. I thought about that exchange for the rest of the day. Not because it was meaningful necessarily, just because it was something. It's been a while since something was something. Marcus? Yeah, I knew Marcus. We got coffee sometimes when our shifts aligned. That little place on Ring 7 that does the synthetic espresso, the one that smells better than it tastes. We'd sit there, and he'd let me talk about whatever I needed to talk about and occasionally say something that made me feel better without really explaining how, and then we'd both go back to work. He was a good person. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what tense to use. The thing about Marcus is that there was always something just slightly off about him that you could never quite name. Like looking at a picture that's almost perfectly level but not quite, and you can't tell which side is wrong, just that something isn't right. He was too calm. That's the closest I can get to it. Not a drugs and meditation kind of calm, not the Zen thing. More like a calm that came from having survived something, from being on the other side of something, and knowing that most things that seemed bad were not actually that bad in comparison. People who have been through real trauma have that sometimes. But with Marcus, it was different because he wasn't sad about it. He wasn't performing okayness over some dark interior. He just was okay, in this deep, structural, fundamental way. I asked him once if he'd been in the military. He said yes briefly, which I later found out was an absolutely spectacular understatement, but that's Marcus. Economy of truth. I asked if he liked it. He thought about it for longer than the question seemed to require, and then he said that he had been very good at it, and that being very good at something and liking it are two different things, and sometimes it takes a while to figure out which one you were. That's the most he ever said to me about any of it. I didn't push. With Marcus, you don't push. There's something in the way he holds himself that tells you very clearly, in no uncertain terms, without him saying a single word, that there are doors in there that are closed and will stay closed, and that's just how it is. He was kind, though, really kind in this undemonstrative, practical way. When one of the Keltheron junior staffers was struggling with the station food and getting sick a lot, Marcus showed up one day with a bag of specific supplements and a dietary guide cross-referenced for Keltheron biology, and just left it on the staffer's desk without explaining himself. When one of the human maintenance workers had a crisis, her family back on Earth, something bad, I don't know the details, Marcus sat with her for 2 hours on the loading dock, and I don't know what he said, but she came back from that conversation like something heavy had been shifted for her. He noticed things. He paid attention in a way that most people don't, and he deployed that attention in the service of other people, and he did it without making it into anything. What I'm saying is that he was a good man. What I'm also saying is that I think there was something underneath the good man that was very, very old and very, very particular, and that the good man was a choice he made every single day, and he was tired sometimes, but he kept making it. I think about that now. I think about what it cost him. I hope it was worth it. I hope somebody told him that. Entry dated 6 weeks prior to the Valanthe incident. I did a security assessment tonight after my shift, not for any official reason, just habit, just because I'm me. The primary transit routes from the consulate to the assembly chamber have 4 significant choke points. 3 of them have adequate coverage from station security. The 4th, Corridor 7, the lower service passage we use on alternate routes when the main ring is congested, has what I would describe generously as intermittent coverage, and what I would describe honestly as a 30-second gap between sensor sweeps and no automated response system within functional range. I flagged this to the security coordinator 8 weeks ago. I flagged it again 6 weeks ago. I filed the written report 4 weeks ago. The security coordinator sent me back a very polite message explaining the resource constraints and the projected timeline for the infrastructure upgrade, and suggested I route around Corridor 7 until then. I wrote back suggesting that alternate routes become primary routes in direct proportion to how often they're used as alternates, and that if Corridor 7 remains the default fallback for congestion delays, we are systematically creating a predictable pattern that any competent threat assessment would identify in about 40 minutes. The coordinator thanked me for my input. I have decided I will not use Corridor 7. This is not my call to make. I am the driver. The routing decisions officially belong to the security team, but I will not use Corridor 7 because I do not answer to security coordinators who don't listen. I answer to something older than that, something that doesn't have a title or a committee or a reporting structure, and that thing is telling me that Corridor 7 is wrong. So I will not use it. I have been wrong before. I have been wrong about specific tactical reads in high-pressure moments, and I have paid for it in ways I don't write about. but I have never been wrong about a place that felt wrong before something happened. Not once. That particular sense has never failed me, and I stopped questioning it a long time ago. I will not use Corridor 7. Entry dated 3 weeks prior to the Valanthe incident. The senator asked me today what I thought of Valanthe Station. We were stopped at the Ring 3 crossing, waiting for a cargo convoy to pass. She was watching the view through the side window, the outer dome, the stars beyond it, that particular blue-black of deep space that you never quite get used to no matter how long you live off-planet. I told her I thought it was a good station. Well run, mostly. The lower ring maintenance teams were overworked but competent. The food situation in the human quarter was improving. The security infrastructure had some gaps, but the personnel were good people. She asked what kind of gaps. I said infrastructure mostly. Coverage issues in some of the secondary corridors. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Should I be concerned?" I told her I was handling it. She looked at me, really looked at me, which she didn't do often, and which I suspected she did rarely with anyone, and she said, "Are you?" And there was something in how she said it that wasn't accusatory, more like she was genuinely asking, like she was checking whether the thing she thought she was relying on was actually solid. I said yes. She held my gaze for another second. Her lateral ridges were flat, fully flat, which meant she was actually receiving the answer, not processing it for political utility. Then she nodded once and went back to her briefs. I thought about that for a while. I think that might have been the first time she actually trusted me. Note, testimony given in Theresi Standard, translated by certified interpreter. I need you to understand something about the Galactic Assembly, investigator, before I tell you what I saw. We have had humans in the Assembly framework for 63 years. In that time, they have been studied, classified, accommodated, represented, and occasionally celebrated. There are human senators, human attaches, human security personnel, human scientists and diplomats and technicians, and yes, drivers. We have developed entire administrative categories for human integration. We have cultural liaison divisions and sensitivity protocols and historical education modules. We think we know them. This is, I have come to believe, one of the most profound mistakes the Assembly has ever made. Not because humans are hostile, not because they are unknowable, but because we looked at them for 63 years through the lens of what they could become in a peaceful and integrated galactic community, and in doing so we stopped looking at what they had been. We stopped asking what they had done in order to survive long enough to reach us. We stopped asking what cost they had paid, what they had put away, what they had had to learn to carry. I watched Marcus Dre for approximately 40 seconds in Corridor 7. I have been an ambassador for 29 years. I have been present at 11 diplomatic crises, 3 active conflict situations, and 1 event that I do not discuss publicly, and that required me to file 3 separate incident reports with the Assembly Ethics Committee. Those 40 seconds are the most significant 40 seconds I have ever witnessed. I will do my best to describe them accurately. He stopped the car. Just stopped it. No warning, no explanation, just the vehicle decelerating and coming to a quiet halt in the middle of Corridor 7. And I remember thinking in the half-second before anything happened that there was something almost gentle about how he did it. Like he was setting something down, not slamming on the brakes. I looked up from my datapad. The senator looked up from hers. Dre had his hands on the wheel and he was looking straight ahead, down the corridor, and the thing I noticed immediately was that he was completely still. Not the stillness of someone who's frozen or uncertain. The other kind. The kind of stillness that is itself a kind of action. He said quietly, "Don't move, don't open the doors." Then he got out of the car. Just like that. He opened the door, stepped out, and closed it behind him with this careful, particular care, like he was trying not to wake someone up. The senator said, "What is?" And I put my hand up without thinking, which is not a thing you do to a senator, and she stopped. And I don't know why I did it except that something in the quality of Dre's stillness had transmitted itself to me, and I understood without understanding that silence was the correct response. Junior Staffer Ray was already reaching for the emergency comm. I shook my head at her, again without knowing exactly why. We sat there in the dark of Corridor 7. And then I heard them. Footsteps, multiple, heavy, in that slightly syncopated rhythm that means bodies who are trained to move quietly but are too big and too numerous to actually manage it. From further down the corridor, from the shadows past where our headlights reached. And then I saw them. I knew before I turned into Corridor 7. The blockage on the alternate route wasn't random. I knew it wasn't random the moment I saw it, two decommissioned cargo units, positioned at an angle that forced exactly one choice. The kind of positioning that looks like accident if you're not looking for intent, but that has intent written all over it when you are. So I knew. I turned into Corridor 7, because there was no other option that didn't put us in the open on Ring 5 with a jammed comm system and active jamming overhead, which would have been worse. And I stopped the car because it was better to make them come to me than to drive into them. I counted them as I stepped out, 7. One of those was hanging back in the shadows. I almost missed him, but he breathed wrong, that slightly elevated rate of someone who's nervous and trying not to show it. So, 7. 4 in the main approach, 2 on the elevated service walkway to the right, 1 in the rear left. They were carrying pulse suppression gear. Military grade, modified for personal transport, harder to jam, shorter range than the standard issue, which meant they'd been prepared for a security vehicle's defensive suite, but hadn't anticipated I'd have mine offline. My defensive suite was offline because I hadn't wanted anyone to know I had one. The one in the center, biggest, best equipment, the posture of authority, raised a translation device and said, in galactic standard, that the senator was required to come with them, that no harm would come to her if she complied, and that any human security personnel should remove themselves from the situation. They didn't know I was the driver. That was funny in a way. I mean that genuinely. There's a particular kind of humor in the gap between what people think you are and what you are, and in that moment it hit me, the specific absurdity of it, this big operation, all this planning, and the one variable they hadn't accounted for was the man behind the wheel. I said in a conversational tone, "She's not going anywhere." The lead operative said, in a tone that was trying for patience but had gone past it, that I didn't understand who I was speaking to or what forces they represented. I said I understood perfectly well, and that didn't change anything. He said something else then, something about what humans were, about the limits of human capability in a confrontation with military operatives of his caliber. The phrasing was very specific, very careful, the kind of careful that meant he'd thought about this speech, had probably rehearsed it, had decided that a brief presentation of their credentials would suffice to resolve the situation without violence. He wasn't wrong exactly. It would have worked on most people. But here's the thing about Berserker program graduates, and I'm going to write this plainly because I am tired and my hands hurt, and I don't have energy for any more performance. We were designed for the moment when it doesn't work. Not the ordinary moment. Not the confrontation that resolves through presence and warning and the rational calculation of outcome. The other moment. The one where everything has gone wrong and the odds are catastrophic, and there is one small warm thing behind you that needs to survive, and you are the only thing standing between it and the dark. We were made for that moment specifically. 11 years of it, 8 programs before mine were shut down. Mine was the last. I was the last through it, and they gave me a number and a rating and a psych eval that said I was probably fine and a discharge and a suggestion to find something quiet, and I did. I found something quiet. I became very good at quiet. But quiet is a choice I make, not a nature I have. And when someone points weapons at the car with the senator in it, the quiet becomes temporarily unavailable. The lead operative raised his weapon. I moved. I have tried to describe what happened next to 4 different investigators, and I am going to try one more time. There were 7 of them, armed. Military operatives, which we later established were members of a splinter faction of the Vorath separatist group, well-funded, extremely trained, very specifically targeting Senator Osmerin for political leverage. There was one of him. The first thing he did was something I don't have a good word for. He moved toward the lead operative, which was not what any of us expected. We expected him to try to get back to the car, to put himself between the operatives and the vehicle, but he moved toward them, not away, and he did it in this fluid, unhurried way, like he was walking to a meeting, like there was nothing in the corridor that could touch him. The lead operative fired. I don't know what kind of field suppression Kit Dre was wearing under his jacket, but the pulse dissipated approximately 8 centimeters from his body. It scattered wrong, the energy bloom too small, absorbed rather than deflected. I'd never seen that in a civilian field kit. I've seen it in military spec gear from the 3rd Vorath engagement, which I covered as an attaché to the assembly security team, and it scared me then just because of what it implied about whoever was wearing it. By the time I processed that the shot hadn't connected, Dre was already on the lead operative. I'm going to do the best I can here. He was not fighting the way trained security personnel fight. I've seen that. It's controlled, it's technical, it's about managing threats in sequence, neutralizing capability. This was something else. It was as if he had calculated, in the time it took to close the distance, the exact mechanical outcome of every possible sequence and had simply selected the one that worked, and was now executing it, and the execution required no apparent thought or effort. 3 of them were down before the other 3 had properly registered what was happening. The ones on the elevated walkway opened fire. Dre rolled sideways and up, which was wrong. That's not how you avoid elevated fire. You don't go up. You go lateral and cover. But up took him to the base of the walkway support strut, and then there was a sound, a very particular sound that I have thought about many times since, like the universe briefly changing a rule. And he was on the walkway, and then the 2 operatives on the walkway were not in any position to continue being operatives. The 7th, the one in the rear left, the one who'd been hanging back, ran. Dre let him go. He just stood there on the elevated walkway and watched the operative run and made no move to follow. Later in the debrief, the investigators asked him why he'd let the 7th one escape. And he said, in that same quiet way he said everything, that the operative had been nervous from the start, that his weapon had stayed in the lowered position throughout the encounter, that he hadn't wanted to be there, and that someone who doesn't want to be somewhere and who has the opportunity to leave should be allowed to take it. The investigators didn't know what to do with that. I did. I thought it was the most human thing I'd ever heard. I watched from the vehicle window. I know I was instructed not to move, and I didn't move. I watched. Through the side viewport, through the dark of Corridor 7, with Joran Vale's hand on my arm, not pulling me away or redirecting me, just present, just grounding. I watched the whole thing. I have been in politics for 18 years. I have been in dangerous situations. I have been present at 2 deteriorating diplomatic incidents where violence was a real possibility, and I managed myself through both of them with composure and clear thinking. I am not, I want this on record, I am not someone who becomes helpless in a crisis. But I am also not someone who has seen what I saw in Corridor 7. I want to be precise about this because I think precision matters. We say things like trained combatant and security specialist and military operative, and we have a picture in our heads of what those words mean. We have spent 63 years building an administrative vocabulary for human capability in a galactic context, and that vocabulary is wrong, or it's incomplete, or it describes something adjacent to what is actually true without ever touching the real thing. Marcus Dre moved through 7 armed operatives in under 90 seconds. I timed it because, and I know this sounds strange, I am a senator and senators time things because timing is everything in politics, and it was the only framework I had available in that moment. So I counted 90 seconds, roughly. What I want you to understand, what I need you to understand, is that the number itself is almost beside the point. It was the quality of it. I keep searching for words and they keep not being sufficient. In Keltheron, there is a phrase. It translates approximately as the shape of inevitability. It refers to a moment when something happens that feels, in retrospect, as though it could not have happened any other way, as though the outcome was structured into the event itself. We use it mostly for political shifts, for historical turning points, for things that feel, afterwards, like they were always going to be. That is what I watched. Afterwards, this is the part that I have thought about most. Afterwards, he walked back to the car. He walked, not ran, walked with this careful, measured pace, like he was being very deliberate about making himself smaller than what he'd just been. He was injured. I could see the way he was holding his left side, the slight favoring that people do when something hurts and they're trying not to show it, but he walked as though nothing had happened. As though he'd stepped out for a moment and now he was stepping back. He opened the driver's door. He got in. He put his hands on the wheel. And then he said, in this voice that was so ordinary it was almost unbearable, "I need to call this in. Are any of you hurt?" I said we were fine. He nodded, he reached for the comm. And I said I don't know why I said it, it wasn't the political response. It wasn't the appropriate senatorial response, it was just what came out. I said his name. His actual name. Marcus. I said, Marcus. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. I said, what are you? He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, not avoidant, just thinking, genuinely thinking about the question and what answer he could give it. Then he said, your driver. He said it simply, not with false modesty, not as deflection, as a statement of identity, of function, of what he was here now in this particular life he'd chosen after the other one. And then he opened the comm and called it in and gave them his position and the number of incapacitated operatives and the direction the 7th one had run. And he did it in this completely flat, professional voice that sounded like he was filing a maintenance report. I sat in the back seat and I thought about him. I thought about all the mornings I had said good morning to the space slightly above his shoulder, all the times he had adjusted the temperature without being asked, all the tea, all the quiet. I thought about 63 years of the assembly studying humans and not seeing this. Not because it was hidden exactly. It was right there. It has always been right there. We just kept looking at the version of humanity we wanted to see, and he kept showing us the version we were comfortable with, because he was kind enough, or tired enough, or wise enough to understand that the other version, the one we saw in Corridor 7, was not something the assembly was ready to look at directly. Maybe now we would have to. I thought about that for a long time. The investigators have been very thorough. I've spoken to 5 of them now. Some of them are angry, which I understand. Some of them are frightened, which I also understand. One of them, the senior one, is neither. He's just methodical. He's trying to understand, and he's trying to understand correctly, and I respect that. I've told him everything he's asked. There isn't much I can do about the sealed record, that's above both of our levels, but I've told him what I can. My left side has 3 cracked ribs and a bruised kidney. There's a graze on my forearm that needed 7 stitches. The medical staff here are good. They're Keltheron mostly, which means their standard protocols don't quite fit human physiology, and they have to adapt on the fly, which they do with impressive competence and only occasional confusion. The senator came to see me this morning. She came to the medical bay unannounced, without her staff. She walked in and pulled up the chair next to my bed and sat down, and she looked at me for a moment, and I noticed, because I always notice, that her lateral ridges were flat. She said she wanted to ask me something, and she wanted an honest answer. I said I'd do my best. She asked me why I stayed. Not in Corridor 7. She said that she understood Corridor 7. She'd thought about it, and she understood that there had been nowhere to go, and that if I'd tried to drive through, I'd have driven into them, and that stopping and getting out was the correct tactical choice. She understood that. She meant before, over the 8 months. She said she knew I'd flagged the corridor security issue. She said Joran had told her about the reports I'd filed. She said she could have had me reassigned. She said she knew I was qualified for things other than driving senators around, and she wanted to know why I stayed. I thought about it for a while. I told her the truth. I told her that I had been doing extraordinary things for a long time, classified things. Things that were important and necessary, and that I had done well, and that doing them had cost something, and after long enough the cost becomes more visible than the importance, and that at some point you want something small, something that has value in a different way, in a daily, quiet, unspectacular way, something that you're the only one who knows the scale of. You adjust the temperature. You order the tea. You flag the corridor report and you reroute. And you do the math on 7 operatives, while a senator drinks her morning tea and doesn't know what's sitting 6 feet in front of her. That's enough. I told her that was enough, that it had been enough for 8 months, and it had actually, genuinely been enough. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I called you driver." I said yes. She said, "I didn't know your name." I said that was all right. She said it wasn't, and the way she said it told me she meant it as a specific moral statement, not a social nicety, which I appreciated. She sat with me for a while after that. We didn't talk much. She had her datapad and I had my journal, and the medical bay was quiet except for the equipment sounds and the particular hum of Valanthi Station doing its continuous, essential turning. Before she left, she put her hand briefly on my forearm, the uninjured one. Not a human gesture, a Keltheran one. The flat palm contact means something specific in their culture, something about acknowledgement of a debt that can't be repaid but won't be forgotten. I know this because I pay attention. She said she had submitted a formal request to the Assembly Records Committee for partial declassification of the Berserker program files. She said she didn't know what the Assembly would do with the information, and she didn't know what it meant for human integration policy, and she didn't know what any of it was going to look like on the other side, but she thought people should know what humans had done, what humans had survived, what humans had chosen to become, and then chosen to put down. She said people should know that the man who drove her car every morning was the last of something, and that he had chosen to be quiet. She left. I sat with that for a while. I don't think I'm the last of something. I think I'm the last of a program which is different. The thing the program tried to build is older than the program. It doesn't die with us. It's just waiting in every ordinary human person for the moment that requires it. That's the part the Assembly has never understood. The program didn't create anything. It just went looking for what was already there. Every human who has ever stood between something they love and something terrible has got some of this in them. The specific modification, the specific training, that's program specific. But the root of it, the choice, the decision to stand in that corridor and not let the dark in, that part is just human. That part has always just been human. Transcribed from Assembly Floor Record. I am going to ask this body a question, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer. What did we think we were doing? When we built the integration frameworks, when we created the cultural liaison divisions and the sensitivity protocols and the historical education modules, When we assigned human attaches and human drivers and human security personnel to our delegations and our offices and our vehicles, and we processed their credentials and gave them clearance ratings and told ourselves we understood them. What did we think we were doing? I sat in a ground vehicle on Velanthi Station 8 months ago, and the man in the driver's seat knew that there was a threat we were not seeing. He had filed the reports. He had raised the concern. He had rerouted the vehicle correctly twice. When the routing was forced and he found himself in the corridor he had told us not to use, he did not hesitate and he did not panic and he did not call for help that was not coming. He got out of the car. He stood between 7 armed operatives and the vehicle he had been hired to drive. And he did this not because of his program, not because of his training. Yes, those things shaped how he did it. But why he did it, that is something else entirely. That is something that the program found rather than created. That is something that was there before the program and will be there long after the program is a sealed file in an archive somewhere. I sat in the back of that vehicle, and I did not know his name. I want to say that again, so that it is clearly heard and clearly recorded. I did not know his name. 63 years. 63 years of integration policy and cultural education and administrative frameworks and interspecies cooperation agreements, and the person who saved my life was someone I called driver. The question before this committee is not what to do about human military classification data. The question is not what to do about the Berserker program. The question is what it means that we managed to spend 63 years with a civilization and never look at it. We looked at what we wanted to see. We wanted to see humans as newcomers, as the young species, the rough-edged, promising ones who needed guidance and accommodation and time. We wanted to see them as the children at the galactic table, because the alternative, looking at what they actually are, what they built in order to survive long enough to reach us, what they did to each other, and to the things that came for them before they ever had faster-than-light travel, the alternative was uncomfortable. It is still uncomfortable. I am asking you to be uncomfortable. His name is Marcus Dre. He is 34 years old. He was the last graduate of a classified Earth program that the Assembly did not know existed because we never asked the right questions. He lives quietly. He drives. He adjusts temperatures. He orders tea. He files security reports that don't get answered. He noticed, in the first 3 weeks of his employment, the way my ears flatten when I'm truly at rest, and he arranged my commute accordingly, and he never said a word about it. He is the kindest and most dangerous person I have ever met, and I didn't know his name. If we want to talk about integration, if we actually want to do this, rather than just produce policies that describe doing it, then we need to start here, with the real question, which is not what humans can offer the Assembly. We have seen that. We have seen it quite clearly if we choose to look. The question is what the Assembly owes humanity for the 63 years we spent not looking. I believe we should start with their names. Note, included in Assembly Archive with the explicit consent of both parties. Marcus. That is the first time I have addressed a message to you by name, and I am aware of what that means. I am told you have been cleared for return to active duty at the consulate, and that you have indicated a preference to return to your previous position. The security coordinator has informed me this is logistically straightforward. I want you to know that you are welcome back, more than welcome. I also want you to know that if you return, things will be different, not procedurally. The routes will be the same. The schedule will be the same. The tea is already on standing order. But I will ask you questions. I will learn what you care about. I will ask about the province with the large storms. I will listen to your security assessments and respond to them, in writing, within 48 hours, and I will implement the ones that are correct, which I suspect is most of them. I will not call you driver. I don't know how to undo 8 months of not seeing. I don't know if it can be undone, but I have spent a great deal of time since Corridor 7 thinking about what it means to carry a burden the way you carry yours, and what it means to carry it in silence, and what it means that you have chosen, every day, to be only as much as the moment requires and no more. I think it is an extraordinary form of discipline. I think it is also very lonely. I am sorry it was lonely. Come back to work if you want to. The car is the same temperature, the tea is the same. And if I fall asleep in the back seat somewhere on Ring 3, I will trust that you are watching the road. V. Osmurin.